Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. The Chair of FDB, the board members of FDB, CEO of FDB, the customers of FDB, and of course the management of FDB. It gives me much pleasure to be here. Of course, when you have two esteemed gentlemen speaking before you, there's not much to say afterwards. But I would, rather than sort of talking about the minute details of how the scheme works, which they have also highlighted, and just put it overall into context. As you know, the borders have now opened up. The fact that we have one of the highest rates of vaccination in the world. This has of course been acknowledged internationally. It also meant or means that more people feel safe to travel to Fiji. A lot of people, when we talked about vaccination, they did not understand that it's not only about us Fijians getting vaccinated and being safe from the ills of the pandemic itself, but also it gives confidence to other people when they view different destinations as to whether they should come to Fiji or not. And at this point in time, of course, people look at things like vaccination rates. It gives them the level of confidence, gives them the level of psychological comfort that they can come to this country because most people are vaccinated or have been boosted with the booster shots. So that is critically important. And policy initiatives such as no jab, no job policy, your ability to access 360 depending on your vaccination, all actually played a very pivotal role in that respect. And I think it created a culture where people became acceptable of getting vaccinated. We now have the 15 to 17-year-olds getting vaccinated. And of course, the next batch will be the 12 to 17-year-olds. With the borders opening up, we've seen, and there are people here from the tourism sector, they'll tell you the numbers actually look pretty good in December, look pretty good in January, but as usual with February and March being our sort of off-peak periods, traditionally, it's still following that particular trend. But the numbers are looking extremely good for coming into late March, April, May, June, July. And therefore, as we had mentioned also last year, which was reflected in the budget, we wanted to create an environment for the business community, small, medium enterprises, and of course the other ones too, in terms of the incentives we offered, that we needed to position or pre-position ourselves before large-scale economic activity does take place. As most business people will tell you, if you're able to pre-position yourself, then you can very quickly take advantage of the rebouncing of the economy. And this is, of course, one of those initiatives that does contribute to that overall objective. From a 20-year development plan perspective, of course, many of the key outcomes have now been somewhat jaded because of the fact that our borders were shut for nearly 2 years. It, however, does not undermine the fundamentals. And if you look, as highlighted by the CEO, SMEs are one of the most, the highest rate of employment rate comes from SMEs. About 60% of the employment force actually are in SMEs. They're also the ones that can bounce back the quickest. And therefore, we need to be able to ensure that SMEs do survive. SMEs actually do get that particular level of assistance. Government had announced a $200 million loan concession, the facility, where you pay no more than 3.99%, you borrowed 0.25% from the RBF. 2 years of interest rate is actually paid for by the government, it's budgeted for. You don't have any principal repayments. And of course, in the third year, you start doing the repayments. There's a particular period of hand-holding. It means there's no pressure in that. You have the micro, small, medium enterprises and large enterprises that could benefit from that too. Which means for 2 years, there's no actual financial burden on them if they were to be able to access a finance facility. All of that now, of course, is assisted. FDB has played a very pivotal role in that respect, and I'd like to commend the chair and the board and the CEO, where FDB, we believe, is the largest lender under that concessional loan facility. Some of the others have been quite slow. And again now, on top of that, FDB has come up with this new initiative. So it does, not only provide access, but instill a lot of confidence. And we are seeing now, we've been talking in the past 3 to 4 weeks with a number of investors, some of them who've actually about to commence actual physical construction. Some of them are actually in the process of finalizing the ability to commence construction. So there is a quiet buzz around the place. What is critically important in all of this, as the business environment or businesses will tell you, is that, excuse me, you need to have consistency in policies. You need to have an overall objective to get to destination A. You don't make things up as you go along. And you also need stability. So stability in an economic sense, in a socio-economic sense, is also critically important. So your ability to ensure that your consumers are also assisted. So over 100,000 people lost their jobs. The fact that government has expended over $500 million, whether it's unemployment benefits through FNPF, whether it's the $360, $90, $50, payment of fees to GPs, market vendors, fees being paid or to the municipal councils for the next 1 year, all of that actually has contributed to people having a bit more disposable income in their pockets. It meant that there was robustness within the economy as opposed to it coming, stagnating. So that combined with the various initiatives now with FDB, and we're very, quite excited about the direction that FDB has taken, in particular in the digital space. That fact that we now have a lot more people connected to internet. We were in Vanuatu about 3 weeks ago, where people who don't get connected to internet, things that we take for granted in Viti Levu or certain parts of Vanuatu, they have absolutely no connectivity whatsoever, not even voice calls. So suddenly they've sort of leapfrog from having no connectivity whatsoever to now having access to Viber, WhatsApp, internet, and even having access to voice calls too. That has meant that they have not only become empowered, but they're able to access this type of loan application system that are now being put in place. So I'd like to commend FDB for that, and we hope that a lot more progress will be made in the digital space. So overall, we need to take a holistic approach to ensuring that there's economic growth, to ensuring there's sustainability in jobs. As we've highlighted in a couple of the budget consultations we actually had over the weekend, in fact in Nadi, we started having our consultation in Nadi, because Nadi obviously is the gateway to tourism, and it has been hit hardest. A lot more people depend on the tourism sector. As we highlighted to them, one of the challenges, of course, going forward now is the phenomenal increase in freight costs globally. In some port-to-port destinations, it has actually increased threefold, in some areas fourfold, and that will be, of course, a challenge. These things, of course, are beyond the control of sovereign states. But how we mitigate those costs increase once the goods land in Fiji is something that we need to be able to deal with. And fundamentally, a lot of it affects not only things like food items, but also things like hardware and various other goods that we do import from overseas. The other point, of course, is the ability for the employment sector, the wages sector. How is the wages sector going to respond to these increases, the inflationary impact? I mean, USA has already stated an inflation rate of about 7% now. So we need to ensure that people's livelihoods are also maintained and are able to meet these costs. So as announced by the Minister for Employment a few days ago, last week, that we're doing a wages review, not just of the national minimum wage, but also of all the other wage sectors. So whether it's in the hotel industry, whether it's in the retail sector, whether it's in the manufacturing sector, that needs to be looked at too. And I think if we're able to get these fundamentals in place fairly quickly, then it contributes overall to a lot more robustness within the economy. And these types of facilities also bring home the point. Fiji Airways, for example, is now employing more people, beginning to recruit more flight attendants as the routes open up. So there is a sense, of course, not just of people getting back their jobs, but also in terms of the consumer demand for goods and services. And SMEs need to be pre-position themselves in that particular space. So congratulations once again to FDB and to the chair, the board, and the management and the CEO. And of course, we look forward to doing more with you. As you know, that government does guarantee FDB's facilities with the ability to go out actually borrow in the market, and of course we'll continue to support them. Thank you. Thanks.